questions, tough questions that IBC demanding answers from the IBC chair demanding answers from the IBC CEO on what happened on some of the issues what happened on the August 8th general election. I have that memo with me, and joining me here in studio, I have with me political commentator Barak Muluka. I have with me Thomas Chiteri, an IT expert, and of course, I have Dr. Shemo Chuodo, a former member of parliament for Rangwe and an IT expert, one of the men who introduced the internet to Kenya back in 1994. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Barak, these 12-point questions that Wafula Chebukati is demanding answers to from the Secretariat, what does it say about the just concluded general election?
I think they paint a very grave situation, and that gravity must be seen in tandem with the response that some of the commissioners are said to have made. It, in a nutshell, suggests that we had no election, no presidential election, that what we heard was a choreography, that while we were queuing out there, people were braving the sun, they were braving the elements. Somebody somewhere seems to have known what they were doing, and they knew that these people were wasting their time. They had a predetermined, a premeditated, a choreographed objective that now you start seeing that the fallout has begun, and some people are saying, hey, we are about to be caught in this trap. We must protect our man, otherwise very soon this will reach us.
You're saying this does not only breathe new life to that petition or the claims by NASA about a stolen presidential election, but also cast aspersions on the other elections as well.
Indeed, in point of fact, when you hear people saying things like we have more governors, we have more senators, we have more this and that, it's boiling down to the same thing, that this was a fatally flawed process, and it's a process out of which you cannot flag out one or two things and say that this one worked, and therefore it proves that this other one here did work. Because you see, here is the chairman of the commission saying that somebody created a password for him and used that password 9,993 times to access the servers, to delete, to vary. I think this is scandalous. Scandal does not become worse than this.
Dr. From an IT perspective, there are some issues have been raised here. We'll get into some of them, but what is your initial reaction to this leaked memo?
Ben, assuming it's true, it's horrendous. It's unbelievable. But perhaps, unlike my good brother Barak, I'll be a little slow to pass judgment, because one is the aspect of authenticity. I want to believe that this actually came from chairman of the IBC Commission, Chebukati. For now, there is still no evidence. I believe it is. I would equally also be concerned, and having had the privilege to head a public corporation, or a number of public corporations, both within and outside Kenya, how organizations operate, I would be concerned that was this an internal document, or was this for public consumption? I do know we talk about transparency and accountability and all that, but also organizations have mechanisms. When you are in a critical organization like the IBC, at times like this, you have to have a mechanism of regulating communications with the public. So I would be keen to know, how did this leak out? Did it come from the chairman's office? And if so, what was the intention? Did it come out of the CEO's office? And again, if so, what was the intention? But that aside, the content of it is heavy. If all those questions being asked were not answered, I would also be concerned to know whether, is this just from the chair or from the commission? The commission has got, I think, 7 members, if not, I'm not mistaken. I'd want to be certain to know that, was this coming from the commissioners, or is there a rift within the commission itself? But overall, I would also say, did the chairperson, before he did pronounce the president-elect, or the purported president-elect, did he ask some of these questions then? So there are many unanswered questions which we hope the commission will give us answers to.
All right. Thomas, I don't know what stands out for you in terms of the ICT issues that have been raised, but one issue that has been raised is that an account was created in the name of the IBC chair with a password, and the same used to access the KIEMS results transmission system or the IBC servers more than 9,000 times, as Barack put it there. How possible is this to happen, and how bad does that look, or how dangerous is that security-wise?
I think maybe just to start by, the whole issue is quite unfortunate if truly this is exactly what happened from a technical point of view.
Right.
And if truly, technically, that is what took place at the independent body, then it is quite unfortunate that that happened. And on the question that you are talking about, from a technical point of view, I will put it that the systems themselves, the systems seem to be very okay. But the people dealing with the systems, because if you check on that point particularly, the chairman is coming out very clear and saying that two ICT officers under the instructions of the ICT director, Muhati, and through a memo through the CEO's office, they were urged or they were directed to create an account with, of course, a username and a password, which is quite okay for any system to access. You need to have an authenticated username and a password. And if that account was created to read the chairman's account without his knowledge, then we are left to wonder why that account had to be created specifically, because any system, any authentic system, you have to access it. An authorized user has to use a username and a password. So if there was a username and a password created by the ICT department under instructions from the CEO's office, as the chairman puts it, then it tells you that actually if the chairman was not involved in the creation of the account, then there must have been something that had to be used with that particular account, which is quite unfortunate. But we are saying we need to really find out if what is being brought in the public limelight is actually the case at the IEBC.
Point number 12 here in that memo. Lastly, the IEBC chairman Chebukati asks the Chiloba to respond and explain why the Kenya Integrated Elections Management System, GPRS, and geofencing features were switched off from the 5th of August 2017. What could this mean in terms of ICT, in ICT terms, Dr.
Ben, ordinarily the GPS allows people, the global positioning system, allows us to locate precisely where a device it is. So it would indicate the longitudinal and the latitudinal positioning of a device. So I would have expected that the system would be on. That would be an important parameter to know that this is being done at a particular place. Having said that, I must also confess that I don't have sufficient insight in terms of what were the parameters that the IBC was expecting. If the system was switched off, you know, being switched off and being off are two different things. I would want to know, was this advertent or inadvertent? Coming from the chairperson, it's like it's casting aspersions. So I would be really keen, if they were deliberately switched off, somebody must be having a good reason for doing that. Because it seems to suggest that we didn't want to identify. Maybe, you know, it's permissible for somebody to be suspicious that maybe somebody had wanted to play about with the system. But again, I would be slow until I see certain evidences. But having said that, there is an important committee that was established by statute. There was the Kiraitu Orengo Committee, ordinarily called ETAC, but simply put is a technical committee. That technical committee was to be chaired by IBC. I would want to believe IBC, ICT director, but it was also representatives of NASA and Jubilee. I was shocked when I saw in the petition by the former Right Honorable Prime Minister that this committee apparently was annulled by courts A court purported that it was unconstitutional to have that committee. But what even surprised me more is how come this happened without the political actors, NASA and Jubilee, knowing or making noise? Why weren't Kenyans told that this committee, which came out of the Joint Select Committee, both of the two houses, the Senate as well as the National Assembly, having come out, and given that there were memberships of both Jubilee and NASA, even if the leadership were not aware, the political elite, at least their representatives, where were the technical people from NASA and Jubilee to raise an alarm?
All right. Barak, this issue of the GPRS happening 2 days before, just a minute, Mr. Thomas, happening 2 days before, 3 days before the election day, does that mean red flag?
You know, Ben Kitili, I cannot sit here and start ifing. If were pots and pans, there would be no need for trinkets. This thing came out about 5 hours ago. Chebukati is not an astronaut who has gone into outer space. Chebukati is in this country. The gravity of these matters are such that if they were not true, Chebukati would have come out to disown them by now, because this is alarming. This is horrendous, like my classmate, Dr. Shemo Chodo says. We were with him at the University of Nairobi, and we were taught to face things frontally and squarely, especially at a time such as this. It is this playing footsie with things that has gotten us where we are. You're saying that the system seems to have been switched off 3 days to the election date. Surely, didn't somebody inside there know that that had happened? What was their intent? We have been told things to the effect that in well over 600 polling stations, the number of spoiled votes was equal to the number of registered voters, and many other things. These are serious things which we must talk about. And finally, we must talk about the rift itself within the commission, because it has got very serious legal implications. One, we know that Chebukati is the only lawyer in that commission among all the 7 commissioners. 2, we know that the law says that the chairman of the commission will be a lawyer. 3, we know that if we must have an election, which I believe we are going to have, that this chairman, who is a lawyer, is the national returning officer and is the person who is going to declare the winner. We also know, 4, that the president, who is now an interregnum president, has no capacity to appoint another chair through the normal system.
Right.
And so finally, therefore, supposing Chebukati were to tell his colleagues that you have cast aspersions upon me, my image has suffered irreparable credibility, a gap, and therefore I must step down. What would happen to this country? Where would we go? There would be no election. So I think these people need to get their act together. I see the people who are saying, I don't know, seeming to be people, as we are very well aware, that the composition of this commission had political appointees. And somebody must be asking someone, why is this going on?
Speaking of which, Barak, is it in order for the chairman of the IBC to write this memo and ask for this accountability for these answers?
Signed in his capacity as chairman. I've seen the memo or a copy of it. He did not say for the commissioners. He did not say anywhere that having consulted other commissioners.
Right.
In fact, he has got a personal interest in this matter, that an account which was created in his name seems to have unlawfully accessed the servers close to 10,000 times. He doesn't have to ask the other commissioners that, do you think I should ask the CEO?
Right.
What those who are disowning that memo should do is, in fact, to answer each of the 12 points, blow by blow, and say that the chair says there are 600 and something stations where the numbers
Right.
went this way and that way. It is not true. This was what happened. That Kim's was switched off. That it's not true. This is what happened. They should tackle them point by point, blow by blow, not hide in this mask of generality.
Right. Thomas, anything, what stands out for you most in terms of these ICT issues that have been raised in this document?
I'll get back to the geolocation and geofencing issue
Right.
of the KIMS kit. And I think that was one of the most vital security feature ever been placed forward by the system itself. Now, just to make people understand the geolocation of the KIMS kit, first of all, it was to give the actual geographical location in terms of the longitudes and latitudes of the particular KIMS kit being used in a specific polling station.
Right.
And now, when you add a geofencing feature to that particular kit, then it tells you that in any case that this kit has to move from one polling station to another polling station, then it literally tells you that it's changing the geolocation. And it has to alert whoever is responsible for the management of the kits that this kit that was meant, for example, let's say a polling station in Kiambu County or Nakuru County, has now moved from Nakuru County and it's being taken to another county. And you see, that was a security feature because even the returning officers, even the people who are supposed to be using the KIMS kit itself, people were specifically designated at various polling stations, whereby if, Ben, you are supposed to be in Kiambu County, you cannot log in even with your username and password, for example, in Nakuru County, because that KIMS kit is specifically meant for Kiambu County. So when you switch off that particular feature for geolocating or locating that particular kit,
right,
and also geofencing, then you're literally telling whoever is responsible that you will not be able to locate this particular kit.
All right.
And I'll want you to use an example like car tracking, for example. If you are tracking your car, if your car is moving from Kenya to Uganda, the geofencing and geolocation feature tells you that this car is no longer now in
it's a
this
red flag,
region, it's
security-wise.
another region.
Let me speak, Daktari, very quickly about another security feature of this.
Right.
Of this. The Al Ghurair, the printing firm, has been mentioned in this document, and they were supposed to, and the chairman wants to know what happened to the printed forms, the ballot papers, and the statutory forms are supposed to have some security features. This apparently did not happen. This was one of the main issues in the presidential petition. How big is this?
Ben, perhaps before I talk about that, allow me to, and I hold no brief for Ezra Chiloba or the commission or anybody else for that matter. But I would have been very happy, and allow me to make an appeal to the Supreme Court, because they're the ones who went into the details, into the merits and the demerits of this matter. I know they have 21 days within which to give the full ruling and judgment. The country is, in a way, waiting for them. I would speak more authoritatively if their report had come, because their report would pinpoint specifically what has happened, because one may ask what the chairperson has raised, assuming this is authentic. What was his premise for raising them? Is he in collusion with some people? That I'm not saying that that's what's happened, but I don't expect the chairperson to be an expert in some of these things. So somebody else must have provided him with this information, and it's not wrong for him to get that information from whatever source he would rely on.
Right.
My recommendation in future would be, and even when we were recruiting the commissioners, personally I believe sometimes we overglorify lawyers in Kenya. I don't even see why the chair must be a lawyer. I would have, at a minimum, knowing the increasing role of technology, I would have required that at least 2 commissioners, let them be in what we call informaticians or ICT experts.
All right.
For now, I don't think there's a single one. Even for the courts, I think in future, either we have judges who are briefed and so on to make work easier, or at least the secretariat needs to have professionals. But coming to Al Ghurair,
very quickly, 30 seconds only because of time.
I think in this particular regard, there were questions. The matter went to court, and court made a determination. But obviously, if there are questions that are being raised now by the chair, I would have expected him to raise these questions even much earlier.
All right, Barak, finally, what next for the commission? I mean, they are facing pressure from both sides of the political divide. NASA is opposed to the election date. Jubilee is opposed to the team that was created by Wafula Chebukati. Where do they go from here?
They go back to the oath of office that they took. They took an oath of office, each one of them in individual capacity, that they were going to serve in faithful adherence to the Constitution, to the laws, and in the best interest of this country. Because what they are doing today, as I have already observed, risks taking this country not just to a constitutional crisis, that this country risks coming to a halt, and we will not even know how to get out of it. So they must come together. They must forget about the political authorities that put them there, whether they were NASA political authorities or Jubilee political authorities. They must forget about the politicians who are calling them and telling them, we sent you there and our interests are not being observed. They must place the country above selfish political and tribal interests and serve the country.
All right. Thank you.
Just a little clarification, Ben. I think although my good brother was saying that when we have a chairman, of course he's got security of tenure,
yes,
but he has a deputy. So in the likely event,
is not a lawyer.
In the unlikely event that he was to be out, oh yes, of course,
Dr.
the deputy may not miss those requirements.
That deputy is
but
not a lawyer.
If you protect me from my good brother here,
right,
my premise is that I think a time has come. We are in a crucial time.
Yes.
The country must come together. I think both parties, there needs to be dialogue between NASA, Jubilee, and the IBC to find a solution.
All right.
I would be against victimizing people. Let the officers who are going to be fired, and they need to be taken to court because the Election Offences Act specifies if you do certain things,
right,
you have to pay for it.
Thank
but
you.
let that be informed by the ruling, the details of the
30
ruling
seconds, Barak,
of
is the fact
Supreme.
that the Vice Chair, Consolato Nkata Maina, is not a lawyer, a big issue.
It is a very big issue. In fact, we need to safeguard Wafula Chebukati like an egg. If he were even just to lose his power of speech,
right,
there would be nobody to declare the president-elect.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. That's where we leave it. Thank you, ICT experts, Dr. Shemo Chodho and Thomas Chiteri, and political scientist Barak Muluka, just putting some of the technological and political implications and issues in this Wafula Chebukati memo to the IBC CEO, Ezra Chiloba. So that's where we leave. We take a quick commercial break, rather, here on KTN Prime. When we return, we'll take a look at what's happening in the world of business as well as other stories. Don't go too far.
This is KTN News.